The voices carried through the thin walls of Chen's family restaurant as I approached the private dining room with fresh jasmine tea. What I heard next would shatter everything I thought I knew about the woman I'd been planning to propose to. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Mom, Dad, I know Jake seems nice, but honestly, he's just a loser. Rachel's voice cut through my heart like a blade. He works at some tiny startup, drives that beat-up Honda, and lives in that cramped apartment. I mean, what kind of future can he really offer me? My hands trembled as I held the tea tray. Through the crack in the door, I could see her gesturing, dismissively, while her parents nodded along. Mrs. Chen's worried expression softened into relief, as if Rachel had just confirmed her worst fears about me. "We were wondering when you'd realize," Mr. Chen said, his voice heavy with concern. "A man should be able to provide properly. This Jake boy, he seems insufficient for our daughter." Rachel laughed, a sound that once brought me joy but now felt like poison in my ears. "Exactly. I've been thinking about breaking up with him anyway. Maybe I should date someone more successful, someone who can actually help our family instead of just being another burden." The irony was so bitter I almost laughed out loud. For 2 years, I had been the invisible hand keeping their family afloat. Every month, I quietly paid their restaurant's supplier bills when they couldn't make ends meet. When Mr. Chen had his heart attack last year, I covered the medical expenses they couldn't afford. When the city threatened to shut down their restaurant for health code violations, I paid for all the necessary renovations. Rachel's designer clothes, her new iPhone, even the car she drove, all funded by the loser boyfriend they were so eager to dismiss. I stood frozen in that hallway, watching the woman I loved reduce me to nothing more than an embarrassment. The engagement ring in my jacket pocket suddenly felt like a 1,000-pound weight. 2 years of my life, 2 years of sacrifices, 2 years of love, all crumbling in a matter of minutes. "Rachel," Mrs. Chen continued, "you're 24 now. It's time to be practical about marriage. Find someone who can elevate our family's status, not drag it down." Rachel nodded enthusiastically. "I've actually been talking to this guy, David. Kim. His family owns 3 restaurants in Seattle, and he drives a Tesla. Now that's husband material." The tea tray slipped from my numb fingers, crashing to the floor with a sound that seemed to echo through the entire restaurant. The conversation, in the private room, stopped abruptly. I didn't wait around to face their shocked expressions. I turned and walked straight out of Chen's family restaurant, my footsteps heavy on the worn wooden floors that I had helped pay to refinish just 6 months ago. The evening air hit my face as I stumbled onto the Portland street, my mind reeling. From what I had just witnessed, 2 years ago, I had met Rachel at a tech networking event. She was charming, beautiful, and seemed genuinely interested in my work as a software developer. What started as casual dating quickly became serious, and soon she was bringing me home to meet her parents. The first time I visited Chen's family restaurant, I could see the love and pride the family had for their business, but I could also see the stress lines on Mr. Chen's face and the way Mrs. Chen counted and recounted the day's earnings with worried fingers. Rachel had confided in me about their financial struggles, how the restaurant business was brutal and they were barely staying afloat. She cried in my arms that night, terrified that her family would lose everything they had worked for. When I made the decision that would define the next 2 years of my life, my startup job at Innovate Tech Solutions paid well, and I lived modestly. I had been saving up for a house, but watching Rachel's family struggle felt like watching my own future in-laws drown while I stood on the shore with a life preserver. So I started helping quietly, anonymously. The first payment was for their overdue rent. I created a fake account and made it look like a satisfied customer had made a large donation. Then came the supplier bills when their produce vendor threatened to cut them off. I paid those too, making it seem like a delayed insurance payout. When the health department cited them for violations, I arranged for the renovation funds to appear as a small business grant. Every month, I would find new ways to funnel money to their family without them knowing it was coming from me. Rachel never suspected a thing. She would come home excited about their family's lucky breaks and mysterious benefactors. She would curl up next to me on my old couch in my small apartment and talk about how grateful she was that things were finally turning around for her parents. I would hold her close, feeling proud that I could be the answer to her prayers, even if she never knew it. The hardest part was maintaining the facade of being financially modest. I drove my old Honda Civic even though I could afford something better. I kept living in my small apartment instead of moving to the luxury condos my coworkers were buying. I wore simple clothes and avoided expensive restaurants when we went out. I wanted Rachel to love me for who I was, not what I could provide. But I also wanted to protect her family. It seemed like the perfect balance. But as I walked aimlessly through the Pearl District that night, I realized how naive I had been. While I was playing the role of the humble boyfriend, Rachel was growing ashamed of what she perceived as my lack of ambition. While I was secretly supporting her family's dreams, she was dreaming of a different kind of man entirely. The very modesty that I thought would prove my genuine love had become the reason she wanted to leave me. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "Hey babe, where did you go? We're still at the restaurant. Come back." I stared at the message for a long moment, then turned off my phone. I couldn't face her. Not yet. Not while her words were still echoing in my mind. Loser, insufficient, burden. Each word felt like a physical blow, made worse by the knowledge of everything I had given up for her family. Walking through downtown Portland, I found myself at Willamette River Park, staring out at the water under the city lights. The engagement ring was still in my pocket, a symbol of a future that had just evaporated. I had planned to propose next week at this very spot during the restaurant's second anniversary celebration that I had secretly funded. Now the thought seemed absurd. How had it come to this? How had my love and generosity been so invisible to the very people I was trying to help? I thought about all the nights I'd eaten ramen noodles for dinner so I could afford to pay their restaurant's bills. I thought about turning down invitations from friends because I couldn't afford to go out after covering the Chen family's expenses. I thought about the house I could have bought, the trips I could have taken, the life I could have built for myself. But what hurt most wasn't the money. It was the realization that Rachel had never really seen me at all. She had looked at my modest lifestyle and seen failure instead of sacrifice. She had looked at my quiet support and seen inadequacy instead of love. She had looked at my future and seen limitations instead of possibilities. As I sat on that bench by the river, watching the lights of the city reflect in the dark water, I made a decision that would change everything. Tomorrow, I would stop all the payments to Chen's family restaurant. I would take off the mask of financial modesty and start living the life I had been denying myself. And Rachel would finally get her wish to be free of her loser boyfriend. But first, she was going to discover exactly what kind of man she was about to lose. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls from Rachel and a string of increasingly frantic text messages. The last one, sent at 2:47 a.m., simply read, "Jake, please call me back. I'm worried sick." I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at her messages with a mixture of exhaustion and dark amusement. Worried sick? If she was so concerned about my well-being, maybe she shouldn't have spent her evening explaining to her parents why I was such a disappointment. Instead of calling her back, I did something I hadn't done in 2 years. I opened my banking app and looked at my actual financial situation without the constant drain of the Chen family expenses. The number that stared back at me was shocking. Without their monthly burdens, I had accumulated enough savings to put a down payment on a house in the hills, buy a new car, and still have a substantial emergency fund. I had been living like a struggling college student while secretly maintaining the lifestyle of someone making 3 times my salary. My phone rang again. Rachel's face appeared on the screen, smiling up at me from our trip to Cannon Beach last summer. That photo was taken during one of the few weekends I had allowed myself to spend money freely, and even then, I had chosen the cheapest hotel I could find. Looking at it now, I could see the forced happiness in my own eyes, the stress of constantly monitoring my spending while maintaining the illusion of financial limitation. I declined the call and got dressed for work. At Innovate Tech Solutions, My colleagues greeted me with the usual morning banter. But I found myself really looking at them for the first time in months. Marcus Williams, my closest friend at the company, was wearing a watch that probably cost more than I had allowed myself to spend on clothing in the past year. Tyler Brooks was planning his third vacation this year, casually discussing flights to Barcelona as if international travel was a normal monthly expense. "You look like hell, man," Marcus said, settling into the workstation next to mine. "Late night coding again?" I almost laughed at the irony. If only my exhaustion was from pursuing my career instead of subsidizing someone else's family business. "Something like that," I replied, opening my laptop and diving into the project I had been neglecting while Rachel's family drama consumed my evenings. For the first time in 2 years, I threw myself completely into my work. Without the constant stress of managing the Chen family's financial crises, I found my mind clearer and more focused than it had been in months. The startup's latest application was a financial management platform for small businesses. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. And I had been developing a revolutionary algorithm that could predict cash flow problems before they became critical. Today, the irony wasn't lost on me as I refined code that could have warned the Chen family about their financial mismanagement years ago. Around noon, Rachel appeared in the Innovate Tech lobby. I could see her through the glass walls, gesticulating frantically to our receptionist, clearly demanding to see me immediately. Her designer purse, which I now remembered buying for her last Christmas, caught the light as she waved her hands in frustration. Sarah, our receptionist, looked uncomfortable as she probably explained our company's visitor policies. "Over at the Commotion, isn't that your girlfriend?" She looks upset. "Yeah," I said, not looking up from my screen. "She'll figure it out." Sarah's extension rang, and she spoke briefly before hanging up and making her way to my desk. "Jake, there's a Rachel Chen here to see you. She says it's urgent family business." It's family business. The phrase that had controlled my life for 2 years, the magic words that had made me drop everything and run to solve their problems with my wallet. Today, they felt empty and manipulative. "Tell her I'm in meetings all day," I said calmly. "She can call me tonight if it's actually important." Sarah looked surprised but nodded and returned to the lobby. I watched Rachel's face transform, from frustration to shock to something approaching panic as she received the message. She stood there for several minutes, clearly trying to process the fact that I wasn't rushing to her side like a trained dog. Finally, she left, but not before giving me one last pleading look through the glass walls that I pretended not to notice. That evening, I did something else I hadn't done in 2 years. I went to dinner at Canard, one of Portland's most exclusive restaurants, and ordered whatever I wanted without checking prices. The braised short ribs cost more than I usually spent on groceries in a week, and the wine pairing was another small fortune. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was living my actual life instead of performing poverty for an audience that didn't appreciate the sacrifice. My phone buzzed constantly throughout dinner. Rachel, Mrs. Chen, even Mr. Chen sent messages asking if I was okay and requesting that I call them back. The desperation in their messages grew more obvious with each text. Mrs. Chen's final message read, "Jake, dear, we're so worried about you. Rachel said you seemed upset last night. Please come by the restaurant so we can talk. We consider you family." Family. Another word that had lost its meaning through overuse and manipulation. Real family members didn't secretly record conversations analyzing your inadequacies. Real family members didn't plan to replace you the moment someone more financially attractive came along. I paid my restaurant bill without wincing for the first time in 2 years and decided to take a walk through the Pearl District. The neighborhood I had denied myself living in was beautiful at night, with upscale condos and trendy galleries lining the streets. Young professionals my age walked confidently through the area, clearly comfortable with their success and unashamed of their achievements. I realized that I could have been one of them all along if I hadn't been so committed to maintaining an image that ultimately backfired on me. As I walked past a luxury apartment complex with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing modern interiors, my phone rang again. This time it was Tyler from work. "Hey man, want to grab drinks?" I'm at Skyline with some people from the marketing department. Skyline was the rooftop bar that I had always avoided because of the prices. Tonight, that seemed like exactly the right place to be. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The elevator ride to Skyline's rooftop felt symbolic as I ascended above. The city I had been hiding from. The bar was sophisticated and sleek, with panoramic views of Portland's skyline and Mount Hood in the distance. Tyler was at a high-top table with several colleagues I recognized, but had never socialized with outside of work functions. "Jake," Tyler called out, genuinely surprised. "I didn't think this was your scene." I ordered a top-shelf whiskey, neat and settled into the group conversation. I'm full of surprises. The marketing team was discussing their latest campaign for a high-end restaurant chain, and I found myself contributing insights I had never shared before. My secret crash. Course in restaurant economics through the Chen family's struggles had given me perspectives that impressed my colleagues. For the first time, I was able to talk openly about business metrics and financial strategies, without worrying that Rachel would overhear and question why I knew so much about money management. "You should join our weekly strategy sessions," suggested Amanda from marketing. "You clearly understand the service industry better than most of our developers." As the evening progressed, I realized how isolated I had become in my relationship with Rachel. I had been so focused on maintaining the fiction of financial struggle that I had withdrawn from friendships and professional opportunities. My colleagues saw me as talented but mysteriously unambitious, never understanding that my ambitions had been entirely redirected toward supporting someone else's family. Around midnight, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Jake, thank God." It was Mrs. Chen, calling from what sounded like a payphone. "Something terrible has happened. We received notice that our main supplier is demanding immediate payment of our overdue account. They're threatening to cut us off completely if we don't pay by tomorrow morning. We don't understand what happened. The payments that were helping us, they've stopped coming." I took a sip of my whiskey and looked out at the city lights spread below me. "That sounds like a difficult situation, Mrs. Chen. Jake dear, we know this is asking a lot, but do you think you could help us? Maybe you know someone, or you could co-sign a loan. We're desperate." The woman whose daughter had called me a loser 12 hours ago was now asking me to solve their family crisis. The woman who had agreed that I was insufficient and burdensome was now depending on me to save their business. The beautiful irony wasn't lost on me. "Mrs. Chen, I'm just a guy who works at a small startup and drives an old Honda. How could I possibly help with something like that?" There was silence on the other end of the line. I could practically hear her realizing the contradiction and asking the family disappointment to be their financial savior. "No, we don't always express it well, but you mean so much to our family. Rachel loves you, and we just want what's best for everyone." I finished my whiskey and signaled for another. "I'm sure you'll figure something out. You always do." I hung up the phone and rejoined the conversation at my table, where Tyler was telling a story about his upcoming promotion and the salary increase that came with it. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged in this world of successful young professionals who weren't ashamed of their achievements. Tomorrow, I would start looking for that house in the hills. Tomorrow, I would finally buy the car I deserved. Tomorrow, I would begin living the life I had been secretly funding for 2 years. But tonight, I was going to enjoy the view from the rooftop and let someone else worry about Chen's family restaurant for a change. 3 days later, I was reviewing mortgage pre-approval documents when Maya Rodriguez walked into Grind Coffee Co. during my lunch break. I had discovered the small coffee shop near my office only recently. After allowing myself to explore the neighborhood I had previously avoided due to its upscale reputation, Maya was behind the counter, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun. Paint stains on her apron suggesting she had been working on something artistic between customers. "The usual?" she asked with a smile that seemed genuinely warm rather than professionally polite. I paused, realizing that I had somehow developed a usual order at this place without consciously deciding to become a regular customer. "Actually, let me try something different today." "What do you recommend?" Maya's eyes lit up with interest, feeling adventurous. Our single origin Ethiopian is incredible today, but if you want something more complex, I just made a new cold brew blend that's been aging for 3 days. As she prepared my drink, I found myself actually watching her work instead of scrolling through my phone or checking emails. Her movements were precise but relaxed, and she hummed softly while grinding beans. There was something refreshing about her focus on the craft self, rather than rushing through motions to serve the next customer. "You know," she said, handing me the cup, "you look different today. More relaxed or something?" I took a sip of the cold brew and was surprised by its complexity. "This is amazing. How long have you been perfecting this recipe?" "About 6 months. I'm actually a graphic designer, but coffee is my real passion. I've been experimenting with different brewing techniques and aging processes." She leaned against the counter, clearly comfortable talking about her work. Most people just want their caffeine fix and don't really care about the process. I used to be one of those people, I admitted. But lately, I'm trying to pay more attention to things I've been taking for granted. Maya studied my face with curious eyes. "That sounds like there's a story behind it." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with yet another call from Rachel. I had been ignoring her attempts to reach me for 3 days, and she had enlisted her friends to try calling from different numbers. The desperation was becoming almost comical. "Sorry," I said to Maya, declining the call. "Someone who doesn't understand the concept of boundaries." "Ex-girlfriend?" Maya asked with a knowing smile. "Recently? Ex. Yes, very recently." Maya poured herself a small cup of the same cold brew and came around the counter to sit at the small table where I was standing. "Want to talk about it? Sometimes strangers' perspective can be helpful." I found myself studying her face as she waited for my answer. Maya had the kind of natural beauty that didn't require makeup or expensive styling. Her eyes were intelligent and patient, and she seemed genuinely interested in my response rather than just making polite conversation. It struck me that I couldn't remember the last time Rachel had asked about my feelings with such authentic curiosity. "It's complicated," I said, sitting across from her. "I thought I was in a relationship with someone who appreciated what I brought to the table. But it turns out she was actually embarrassed by me." Maya frowned. "That's horrible. What could she possibly be embarrassed about?" The question was so sincere that I found myself being more honest than I had planned. She thought I wasn't successful enough, wasn't ambitious enough. She wanted someone who could provide a more luxurious lifestyle. "But you're a software developer, right? I've seen you working on your laptop in here. Seems like a pretty good career to me." I laughed, but it wasn't bitter this time. It is a good career. I guess I just wasn't presenting myself in a way that showed what I was actually capable of. Maya leaned forward, her chin resting on her hand. "That sounds like her loss, honestly. I mean, success isn't just about flashy displays of wealth. Some of the most accomplished people I know live pretty modestly." Her words hit me in an unexpected way. For 2 years, I had convinced myself that my modest lifestyle was a noble choice. But the truth was more complex. I had been hiding my success not out of humility, but out of fear that Rachel would love me for the wrong reasons. Instead, my deception had backfired completely, making her think I was failing when I was actually thriving. "You know what's funny?" I said. "I've been so focused on proving I was worth loving for the right reasons that I forgot to actually live my life." Maya smiled. "That's very philosophical for a Tuesday afternoon. I think I understand what you mean." A comfortable silence settled between us as we both sipped our coffee. I realized this was the first genuine conversation I had experienced in months. With Rachel, every discussion had been filtered through the lens of maintaining my false persona or managing her family's latest crisis. With Maya, I could just be present in the moment. "Can I ask you something?" Maya said suddenly. "Why did you choose to live modestly? I mean, if you're successful but hiding it, there must have been a reason." The question required more honesty than I was prepared for, but something about Maya's direct approach made me want to answer truthfully. I was trying to protect someone I cared about from feeling like I was only helping her family because I wanted something in return. Maya's eyebrows raised slightly. "You were helping her family financially?" "More than helping. I was basically keeping them afloat without them knowing it was me." The words tumbled out before I could stop them. I thought if they knew the money was coming from me, it would change the dynamic of our relationship. I wanted her to love me for who I was, not what I could provide. But she ended up leaving you because she thought you couldn't provide enough. Exactly. I shook my head at the absurdity of it. I played the part so well that I convinced her I was actually struggling. Maya sat back in her chair, processing this information. That's actually kind of heartbreaking, she said. You gave up your own happiness to help people who didn't even know it was you, and in the end, they turned on you for not being someone you never claimed to be. Her clarity was almost jarring. She had grasped in minutes what I'd been wrestling to put into words for days. When you say it like that, it just sounds dumb, I replied. Not dumb, Maya said softly. Maybe overly generous, but also a little self-destructive. Just then, my phone buzzed. A message from Mr. Chen popped up. Jake, we need to talk urgently. The restaurant situation is critical. Please call me back. Maya noticed the notification. Is that the family you were helping? Their business is falling apart. Now that I stopped sending the money, they still don't know who was helping them. Are you going to tell them? I paused to think. I'm not sure. Part of me wants them to realize it on their own. Another part feels like maybe it's their turn to struggle like I have, quietly, for the past 2 years. Maya stood up, finishing her coffee. Whatever you decide, just make sure your reasons are the right ones. Don't let their mistakes change you into someone you're not. She returned to the counter to help a customer, and I sat there, struck by how a near stranger had offered me more honest and helpful advice in 5 minutes than I'd gotten from people closest to me in years. Maya's perspective was unclouded. She had no history with me, no ulterior motives. I spent the rest of my lunch break working on my laptop. Every now and then, Maya would look over and smile. I'd smile back, free from the pressure and anxiety that usually came with Rachel. With Maya, I felt seen, not as a project or problem, but as a person. When I finally packed up to leave, Maya walked over and handed me a small bag. I roasted these beans this morning using a new method I've been experimenting with. Try them out and let me know what you think. I looked at her, surprised. You didn't have to do that. I know, she said. Wanted to. She hesitated for a moment before adding, You strike me as someone who's been looking after everyone else for a long time. Maybe it's time to let someone look after you. Her words stayed with me as I walked back to work. When was the last time someone had done something thoughtful for me with no strings attached? When had someone offered help instead of more expectations? That evening, I brewed the coffee she'd given me using the high-end espresso machine I'd bought. Months ago, but rarely used, it had always felt too extravagant, given my supposed financial constraints. The coffee was incredible, rich, nuanced, and clearly crafted with care. As I drank it, I thought about Maya's generosity and the quiet sincerity of her gesture. For the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely hopeful, not just because I was leaving something painful behind, but because I was moving towards something real. Later, my phone rang. It was Rachel. But instead of the usual guilt or emotional weight, I felt only mild curiosity. I let the call go to voicemail and continued, sipping my coffee, browsing listings for a new home. For the first time in years, I felt ready to live on my own terms. But the peace didn't last long. Exactly 1 week later, during dinner with Maya at her favorite Thai spot, everything changed. We'd been spending more and more time together, getting to know each other without masks or pretenses. Maya knew everything. About my job, the money, even the complicated situation with Rachel's family. She listened, offered thoughtful insights, never judged. I've been thinking about what you told me, she said, playing with her noodles. You think the Chens ever figured out it was you helping them? I was about to answer when my phone lit up with a flood of messages and missed calls. Text after text, most from numbers I didn't recognize, all urgent, panicked, emergency, hospital, come now, what's going on? Maya asked, noticing my sudden change in expression. I read the messages, my heart pounding. It's Mr. Chen. He's had a heart attack. Maya's concern was immediate. Are you going? Before I could respond, my phone rang again. It was Jessica Park, one of Rachel's friends. Thank God you picked up, she said, her voice tight with urgency. You need to get to Providence Medical Center. Mr. Chen collapsed at the restaurant during the dinner rush. They think it's his heart again, but this time it's really bad. How bad? I asked, already standing, grabbing my jacket. Bad enough that they're preparing for emergency surgery? But there's a problem. The insurance is still a mess from last time, and the hospital's asking for a large deposit before they'll proceed. The old burden returned, that familiar sense of responsibility, only this time it wasn't about the restaurant or their livelihood. It was about whether Mr. Chen would live or die. Maya was already up and gathering her things. I'm coming with you. You don't have to, I said. This is my situation to handle. No, she replied firmly. This is a man's life, and you don't have to carry this alone. We drove in silence through Portland's congested evening traffic. Every few minutes, Maya would reach over to rest her hand on my arm, a small gesture that calmed me more than words ever could. At the hospital, the cardiac unit buzzed with tense efficiency. We found Rachel and her mother in the waiting area, both pale and tear-streaked. Mrs. Chen clutched a tissue in her hands, eyes swollen from crying. When she saw me, her expression crumbled. "Oh, Jake, thank goodness," she said, grabbing my hands tightly. "The doctors say he needs immediate surgery, but there's a problem with the payment. The insurance. It's all tied up. They need $15,000 as a deposit before they can proceed. And our insurance is refusing to pre-approve because of the outstanding balance from his last treatment." Rachel looked up at me, her usual composure completely shattered. "Jake, I know things have been weird between us lately, but please, we don't have anyone else to turn to. The restaurant's accounts are frozen because of the supplier disputes and we can't access any funds." The irony was staggering. They were begging for help from the same man Rachel had called a loser just days earlier, asking for exactly the kind of financial rescue that proved I was never insufficient at all. But looking at Mrs. Chen's desperate face and thinking about Mr. Chen fighting for his life in surgery, my anger felt suddenly petty and irrelevant. "What exactly does he need?" I asked. Doctor appeared at that moment, still in surgical scrubs. "Are you the family members I was told about?" "I'm Dr. Martinez. Mr. Chen needs immediate bypass surgery. We've stabilized him for now, but we can't wait much longer. The financial counselor needs to speak with you about the payment arrangements before we can proceed." The financial counselor turned out to be a tired-looking woman named Patricia, who led us to a small office filled with paperwork and computer screens. She explained the situation with professional sympathy, but obvious frustration.
"Oh, Mr. Chen's
insurance should cover the majority of the procedure, but there's a substantial outstanding balance from his previous cardiac episode that's preventing pre-authorization. The hospital requires a deposit of $15,000 to ensure payment, which will be refunded once the insurance issues are resolved." Mrs. Chen looked at me with desperate hope. "Jake, I know we're asking for a miracle, but is there any way you could help us? We'll pay you back as soon as the insurance situation is sorted out." Rachel remained silent, but I could see the internal struggle playing out on her face. She was watching the man she had dismissed as financially inadequate being asked to provide the exact kind of substantial assistance that proved her assessment completely wrong. Maya squeezed my hand gently. "Whatever you decide, I support you," she whispered. I looked at the financial counselor. "If I pay the deposit now, how quickly can the surgery proceed?" Patricia's eyebrows raised slightly. "Immediately, Dr. Martinez has a surgical team standing by." I pulled out my credit card and handed it to her. "Let's do it." The transaction took less than 5 minutes, but the impact was seismic. Mrs. Chen burst into grateful tears, clutching my arm and thanking me. Repeatedly, Rachel stared at me in complete shock, clearly trying to process how her allegedly struggling boyfriend had just casually produced $15,000 for her father's emergency surgery. "Jake," Rachel said quietly as we walked back to the waiting area, "how did you have that kind of money?" I finished for her. "It's the same way I've had money for the past 2 years, Rachel. The same way I paid your family's restaurant bills, your father's previous medical expenses, and your renovation costs. I've always had it. You just never bothered to look past the surface." Maya stayed close to my side as we settled in for what would likely be a long wait. She had witnessed the entire interaction without comment, but I could see her processing the dynamics she was observing. Rachel kept glancing at both of us, clearly struggling to understand how the situation had shifted so dramatically. Dr. Martinez appeared 3 hours later with good news. The surgery had been successful, and Mr. Chen was stable in recovery. He would need several days in the hospital and months of rehabilitation, but the immediate crisis had passed. "You saved his life," Mrs. Chen said to me, gripping my hands tightly. "I don't know how we can ever repay you for this." "You don't need to repay me," I said. "I'm glad he's going to be okay." Rachel followed me into the hallway as Maya and Mrs. Chen went to see Mr. Chen in recovery. "Jake, I need to understand what just happened. You've had this kind of money the whole time?" "Yes, Rachel, the whole time, while you were complaining to your parents about my insufficient prospects. I was actually in a better financial position than most people our age." "Then why did you live like you were struggling? Why the old car and the small apartment and never wanting to spend money on nice things?" I leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted by the emotional weight of the evening, because I wanted you to love me for who I was, not what I could provide. And because I was already providing everything your family needed without them knowing it was me. Rachel's face went through a series of expressions as she processed this information. Shock, confusion, and finally something that might have been shame. "You were the anonymous benefactor," she said quietly. "All those mysterious payments that saved the restaurant. I was you every single one. For 2 years, I've been living on a budget so tight I could barely afford groceries because I was paying your family's bills. I wanted to help, and I wanted to make sure you knew I loved you for the right reasons. But I didn't know," Rachel whispered. I thought you didn't have ambition." "You thought I was a loser," I corrected. "Those were your exact words to your parents." Rachel's composure finally cracked completely. She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, tears streaming down her face. "Jake, I'm so sorry. I had no idea if I had known. If you had known, would you have loved me differently? Would you have treated me with more respect?" I asked. "Because that's exactly why I didn't tell you. I wanted to know that you valued me for who I was, not what I could give you." Maya appeared at the end of the hallway, checking on our conversation. With obvious concern for my well-being, seeing her there, patient and supportive, without any expectation of dramatic displays or emotional manipulation, crystallized something important for me. "Rachel," I said gently, "I'm glad your father is going to be okay. I'm glad I could help. But I think we both know that this doesn't change what happened between us. You fell out of love with the person you thought I was, and I fell out of love with the person you actually are." Maya walked over and stood beside me, not possessively but supportively. Rachel looked up at both of us, understanding finally dawning on her face. "This is Maya," I said. "She's been helping me remember what it feels like to be appreciated for the right reasons." Rachel nodded, slowly, wiping her eyes. "She seems lovely." As we walked toward the hospital exit, Maya slipped her hand into mine. "That was incredibly generous what you did tonight." "It was the right thing to do," I replied. "But it was also the last thing I'll ever do to rescue that family. They're going to have to figure out their own path forward." The Portland night. Air felt clean and full of possibility as we stepped outside. Tomorrow, I would continue house hunting. Tomorrow, I would finally buy the car I deserved. And tomorrow, I would continue building a relationship based on honesty and mutual respect instead of secrets and sacrifice. But tonight, I had saved a man's life and finally closed the chapter on a relationship that had been built on all the wrong foundations. 18 months later, I stood in the kitchen of my new house in the West Hills, grinding Maya's latest coffee creation while she finished setting up her art easel on the deck overlooking the city. The morning light streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows that I had once thought were too extravagant, but now appreciated every single day. My Tesla Model S sat in the driveway next to Maya's vintage Subaru, a perfect representation of our different approaches to life that somehow complemented each other perfectly. Maya had moved in 6 months ago, bringing her creative chaos into my previously sterile bachelor pad and transforming it into something that actually felt like home. Her paintings covered the walls, her plants filled every sunny corner, and her laughter had replaced the anxious silence that had defined my living space for years. The Henderson wedding photos turned out amazing. Maya called from the deck, where she was reviewing her latest freelance project on her laptop. She had started a side business doing wedding photography. It's combining her artistic eye with her natural ability to make people feel comfortable. They want to hire me for their anniversary party next year. I smiled, watching her work through the window. Maya's creative pursuits had flourished since she quit her corporate marketing job and went full-time freelance. My financial stability had given her the freedom to take creative risks. But unlike my experience with Rachel's family, Maya contributed equally to our life together. She insisted on paying half of all household expenses from her growing photography income, maintaining her independence even as we built our life together. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus at work. IPO announcement goes public tomorrow. You ready to be officially rich? Navatex public offering had been in development for 8 months, and my stock options were about to make me genuinely wealthy instead of just comfortable. The irony wasn't lost on me that Rachel had left me for not being financially successful enough, only to miss out on the biggest financial windfall of my life by a matter of months. Good news? Maya asked, noticing my smile as I joined her. On the deck with our coffee, the IPO announcement is tomorrow. If the projections are accurate, we're going to have some very interesting decisions to make about our future. Maya reached over and squeezed my hand. Our future. I like the sound of that. We had talked about marriage several times, but both of us were content with the natural progression of our relationship. Unlike the constant pressure and drama that had characterized my time with Rachel, Maya and I moved forward together at a pace that felt organic and unforced. A car pulled into our driveway, interrupting our peaceful morning. I didn't recognize the vehicle, but when the driver stepped out, my stomach dropped. It was Rachel, looking thinner and more fragile than I remembered. Maya noticed my reaction. Immediately, "Do you want me to go inside?" "No," I said firmly. "Whatever she has to say, I'd prefer you hear it too." Rachel approached our deck hesitantly, clearly uncomfortable with Maya's presence, but determined to deliver whatever message had brought her here. She looked around at our house, the cars, the obvious signs of prosperity, and I could see her, processing the full extent of what she had walked away from. "Hi, Jake," she said quietly. "Maya, I hope you don't mind me stopping by unannounced." "What do you need, Rachel?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral but not hostile. "I wanted to thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And to apologize properly for everything that happened." She explained that her father had made a full recovery and had returned to work at the restaurant. More importantly, the financial crisis had forced the family to completely restructure their business practices. They had hired a proper accountant, streamlined their operations, and were finally running the restaurant profitably without external assistance. "We never knew," Rachel continued, tears forming in her eyes. "Dad figured it out about 6 months ago when he was going through old financial records. He realized the timing of all those anonymous payments perfectly matched the period when you and I were together. When he told me, I felt sick thinking about how we treated you." Maya listened, silently, but I could feel her supportive presence beside me. "The worst part," Rachel went on, "was realizing that you were the answer to everything I thought I wanted, but I was too shallow and stupid to see it. I spent 2 years complaining that you weren't ambitious enough, weren't successful enough, when you were actually more generous and accomplished than anyone I knew." I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "Rachel, I appreciate you coming here to apologize. But you need to understand that the problem wasn't just that you didn't know about the money. The problem was that you were ready to discard our entire relationship based on superficial judgments about my worth as a person." "I know," she whispered. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I had to try to make things right somehow." Maya spoke for the first time since Rachel's arrival. "Jake's told me a lot about your relationship, and I think you both learned important lessons from what happened. The question is what you're going to do with those lessons going forward." Rachel looked at Maya with something approaching respect. "You're lucky to have found someone who sees your real value. I hope you don't make the same mistakes I did." "I won't," Maya said simply. Because I fell in love with who Jake actually is, not who I thought he should become. After Rachel left, Maya and I sat quietly on the deck, processing the unexpected visit. How do you feel about seeing her again? Maya asked. Sad, mostly, I replied honestly. Sad that it took losing everything for her to understand what she had, but also grateful, because if she hadn't pushed me away, I never would have found you. Maya smiled and curled up against my side. Everything happens for a reason, I guess. That afternoon, we drove to Grind Coffee Co., where Maya still worked part-time despite her growing photography business. She loved the creative community that gathered there, and I had come to think of it as the place where my real life began. Tyler and Marcus met us there to celebrate the upcoming IPO announcement. We spent the evening surrounded by friends who knew and appreciated both of us for who we actually were. As I watched Maya laugh with our friends, discussing her latest art project with the same passion she brought to everything in her life, I realized that Rachel had been right about one thing. I was incredibly lucky to have found someone who saw my real value. But the luck wasn't in finding Maya specifically. It was in finally learning to value myself enough to be found by the right person. The IPO announcement the next morning exceeded even our most optimistic projections. My stock options were worth more money than I had ever imagined having, enough to pursue any dream or opportunity that appealed to us. But as Maya and I discussed our options over her perfectly brewed coffee in our beautiful kitchen, I realized that the real wealth in my life had nothing to do with bank account balances. I had found someone who loved me for exactly who I was, someone who contributed to our partnership instead of simply consuming from it, and someone who saw my generosity as a virtue rather than a weakness to be exploited. Oh yeah. Maya had taught me that authentic love didn't require deception or sacrifice of my own happiness. It required honesty, mutual respect, and the courage to be vulnerable with the right person. Rachel had called me a loser to her parents, not knowing I was secretly paying all their debts. But Maya called me her partner every single day, knowing everything about who I really was and choosing to build a life with me anyway. The difference between those two relationships taught me everything I needed to know about love, success, and the kind of person I wanted to be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.